Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It is July 27th, 2023 in the year of our Lord, and welcome back to the lobby of the Hotel Orloff. It's a hot day here where you go outside and your glasses steam up with all the humidity. When did it start being so hot in July? It seems like it used to always be kind of chilly in the end of July going into August. Darn you, climate change? It has to be climate change, right? It has to be. Anyway, so we're back in the lobby of the historic Hotel Orloff here in historic Rural Retreat, Virginia. We've got Right Side Broadcasting on the TV here in the lobby, watching some Congress investigating the rise in overdose deaths from fentanyl coming in from other countries. And it's a huge problem in this country, and but I'm sure our very efficient President Joe Biden will solve this crisis very quickly, wouldn't you think? Well, what do you think, Drew the dog?
The decision to allow 30,000 individuals from these very poor countries to enter the U.S. every month exacerbate or improve the drug crisis.
Drew agrees. Drew loves President Biden. He's just a great president. Wow. I'm being sarcastic. For those of you that require someone to smile when they're telling a joke. Okay, so we've got stuff to do, I believe. What do we need to do? Oh, well, let's go upstairs. Oh, wait a second. I wanted to rehang a picture.
It's important. All of us have a role to play. None of us can fix this problem by themselves.
I agree. But allowing thousands of people who do not speak English and who will have a very hard time finding a job in the United States will exacerbate the crisis in the United States.
I'm going to rehang this picture upstairs. That's one thing I wanted to do this morning. Okay. Oh, I was really excited to get this, ladies and gentlemen. It's a sword, and it was stuck into a cheeseburger. And to me, it's, I don't know why. I think that's cool. I haven't seen a sword like this stuck in a cheeseburger in decades. Here's a sword from an Aurora model kit. I don't know which one of the knights this was, the black knight, the blue knight, I don't know. But this is all that's left of that model kit that I got in second grade. I don't think that model kit was ever put together now that I think about it. It was just in pieces in a box, and then somehow everything disappeared but that one sword. Okay, so I'm wearing this 1970s jacket that belonged to my older brother when he was like in college in the 70s, and I guess that joke is, amusing because I was wearing a jacket and it's July and it's really funny. But I think I'll take it off because in all honesty, it is hot and incredibly humid. So I will take that jacket off if you don't mind. Okay. Let's go on up. I got a lot done in the comic book room yesterday. I did a live stream yesterday, and Kevin Johnson from Gotham City came on. Meyer Greenblatt came on, and a younger guy came on the live stream that wanted to know about comic books but owned no comics and really didn't know anything about them. And so it's kind of a unusual thing. I would think someone watching this show would, that was towards the end of that live stream, you would think someone watching this show would know something about comics. Um, anyway, they seem like a nice guy. Turning off lights because that hurts Greta Thunberg's feelings when you leave lights on. And Woodsy Owl doesn't like it too. No, Woodsy Owl didn't care about lights. Woodsy Owl didn't like pollution. I'm all in for Smokey the Bear. Forest fires are bad, and I'm all in for Woodsy Owl. It's not good to pollute and drop trash everywhere. But all this stuff about it's just getting hotter. That's all you see on the news. I don't know if I buy that. Oh, I got a commission to do a painting yesterday. So I'm going to start that today as soon as I finish this broadcast. And I was commissioned by one of the regular viewers to make a painting of the Rankin Bass Hobbit, Bilbo Baggins. Okay, for those of you, just in case we have people that have never heard of these things, because now I realize I've always kind of tried to stop and explain things on my show with the assumption there may be people that don't know anything about comics, and then I guess that was vindicated yesterday when I discovered I have a viewer that doesn't know anything about comics. But anyway, so Rankin Bass is an animation studio that did a lot of holiday specials that would come on during holidays, and for Thanksgiving of 1977, there was a Hobbit cartoon that came on, I think, NBC. Hold on a second. The show's going to be up on YouTube. It's episode 816. It's July 27th, 2023. As soon as I finish, would you please upload this show to YouTube? Thank you. And move the limousine around to the front of the hotel. And roll the windows down, because it's incredibly hot out there, ladies and gentlemen. All right, thank you thank you very much. Thank you very much. Anyway, so Rankin Bass. There was a cartoon version that came out in 1977, and right about that same time, there was an unauthorized Lord of the Rings cartoon that came out in theaters called Wizards, but it was really half Cheech Wizard and half a little bit of Lord of the Rings and a little bit of, it was Ralph Bakshi film. So that was just a few months after Star Wars came out, so we got to see The Hobbit on TV. It was a musical cartoon, right? It was pretty good. I got the soundtrack record when I was a kid, with Glenn Yarborough singing. Where's my microphone? Oh, here we go. There's some like, the greatest adventure is what lies ahead. Believe in yourself or you soon will be dead. Something like that. The Greatest Adventure is the theme song to The Hobbit. Anyway, I got a commission. He wants me to paint Bilbo Baggins, the Rankin Bass Bilbo Baggins, in a hot rod Ratfink style race with either one of the goblins or the golem from that same Rankin Bass Thanksgiving cartoon special. And I was looking back at that this morning, and I realized Brother Theodore was the voice of Golem. I didn't know who Brother Theodore was when I was a kid, but Brother Theodore is insane, man. He's got this great voice. You hear him in some of those old movie trailers for horror movies. It's like, the house by the cemetery. This horrifically horrible, raspy German accent. Just sounded completely insane. He was a comedian. Brother Theodore, one of the greats. Anyway, so I'm supposed to paint a Ratfink style hot rod race with Bilbo Baggins. And it's weird because I just found a poster of Bilbo Baggins that I guess I got from Scholastic Books in 6th grade when the teacher had you fill in what books and posters you want to order, and they come a few weeks later. I have a poster of Bilbo Baggins that used to be in my childhood bedroom, and I just found it, so I can use that as a reference, and plus, obviously the internet. I think I have that on DVD. I know I do. Yeah, The Hobbit. But anyway, so The Hobbit came out, and then I guess maybe a year and a half later, there was an official Lord of the Rings adaptation by Ralph Bakshi, who had done Wizards, and it was all rotoscoped, where he basically filmed the movie with actors, and then the animators traced over them. And he did the first book and a half of Lord of the Rings, and then it didn't do well at the box office enough for him to finish it. And then Rankin Bass came in maybe not too long afterwards and did an adaptation of Return of the King, the third book. So the second half of the second book, The Two Towers, wasn't ever adapted into cartoon form. And then, I don't know, a couple decades later, how long was it, in the early 90s? No, it wasn't. It was in the when the heck was that? Early 2000s. That's when they made the live action Lord of the Rings, the 3 movies, which were great. And then they made a Hobbit. They tried to make the Hobbit into 3 movies, and it didn't work. I didn't think it worked. It was... They added all this stuff in there to try to make the Hobbit into something it wasn't. But I look back on the adaptation of Lord of the Rings that Ralph Bakshi did, and he there's a scene with Gandalf and Frodo Frodo's saying, "I wish the ring had never come to me, Gandalf. I wish this never happened." And then Gandalf says something like, see if I can remember, "So do all who live through such times." Then what is his line? "But it's not for us to decide. Ours is to decide what to do with the time that is given us." It's this very profound, one of the greatest lines in the whole book. Because Lord of the Rings really is one book. He was forced, it would have been this. It would have been like one of those stupid omnibus books that people buy, and probably... those omnibus books are too big, man, seriously. But anyway, Lord of the Rings is supposed to be one book, but the publisher said, "Hey, let's break it into 3. He says, "Okay, whatever. You're the one writing the checks." But anyway, it's one of the greatest lines. But in the Ralph Bakshi movie, Frodo says, "I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish this never happened." And then Gandalf says, "Yeah, I know," instead of the profound lines, because Ralph Bakshi, yeah, I like Ralph Bakshi, but mostly he's not brilliant. He takes other people's stuff and usually runs it, like Fritz the Cat. Anyway, but he's just wonderful. Oh, look, I found an original illustration by Joe Riley. Wait, this is an original illustration, or is this a photocopy? Don't get me lying here. This could be a photocopy, but it's the only existing copy. I'm almost positive of this. I've got a lot of his photocopies of his art. I think I have an original illustration of Space Ghost, or Jan of Space Ghost. Anyway, I was up here working on the comic room yesterday, and so got this. you set up this display on top of your comic boxes, and then when you need to get into the comics, you have to move all this stuff. It's kind of annoying. This is one thing I might use as a reference for the hot rods. So I need to pull this, and let me pull that Bilbo Baggins poster out of the closet over here. Yeah, yesterday it was really humid, and it made the whole, when I opened these old closets, it really smelled differently. The wood inside here, it didn't have quite that smell today. It was just the humidity was very high yesterday. But if you're used to North Texas, you get, it's far hotter. I mean, yesterday it got up to 97, which is nothing for North Texas. But you get used to a new environment, and then it starts feeling hot when it's like 82. But the humidity kind of gets you. Okay, so this is Bilbo Baggins. This is the poster I got back then. He really was drawn to be a hideous creature. Actually, I'm starting to realize I'm starting to look like him. I need to lose weight. That almost looks like what it looked like when I got up this morning when I looked in the mirror. All right, so I'll use this as a, because this is big and my eyes aren't getting any younger, so this will help me remember what Bilbo Baggins looked like in that TV show. Here's get the light better. Here's Bugs Bunny. It's not a big little book. It's a better little book. I've shown you this before. But the thing is, books like this used to be worth a lot of money, and now you can get them $5, $7. Depends on where you go, and it's because the people that are nostalgic for those old books aren't around anymore, and I just don't know what's going to happen. I was talking about this last night. People don't like to hear it when I start talking about it. The future of comic books as far as our 40 years from now, I just don't see there being anyone out there that cares, except maybe for the first appearance of Superman or Spider-Man. Those will still, Batman, those will still be characters people know in 40 years. But you just don't know. But some of you will be here in 40 years. Most of us won't be. It's just one of those things. I am keenly aware that the people buying comics, it's an older and older group. There's younger people. They've got their own thing. They've got video games. They've got their phones to stare at, and then if they go to a comic store, they see the modern comics and they just look terrible, and they're not interested in those. And what can you do? What can you do? Yeah, did you get the limousine pulled around? Oh, did you work on the radiator? Oh, no, you didn't. Oh, that's right. We ran out of money. All right. Well, stop shirking your duties and mow the lawn. We don't have a lawnmower. Well, you figure it out. Get some scissors or something. All right. Bye. Swine. Yeah. Amazing. Fantastic. Well, I was on the Four Color Fossils show last night, and at the end, Graphic Man told us that the show is going, for the foreseeable future, not going to happen because he's been told by the doctor to get bed rest for about a month. And So while he recovers, the show will be back, but it's not going to be around for a little bit. And he said not to worry, but it's a condition he needs to take seriously, and so you just say a prayer, and he'll get better, and he'll come back real soon. In the meantime, everyone was kind of like, well, do we keep doing a show? And the people were kind of staring at me. I said, well, I guess I could step up. But I said I'd kind of rather do the show on Thursdays. And then I realized later, last night, that on Thursdays, I've got one, this is the only computer we've got here, and my wife needs to borrow that on Thursday nights. So I may need to do it on Wednesday, but I won't. I don't think I should call it Four Color Fossils, because that's his show, and Four Color Fossils should be on hiatus until he gets back. And I'll do a Wednesday night show, and some people will come on, and some people, anyone that wants to come on can come on. It won't be as professional, and slick, but but since people are used to Wednesday night, I'll do that. At first I was thinking Wednesday, it's really embarrassing why I didn't want to do it on Wednesdays, because next week, and this is very embarrassing, Big Brother is starting up again, the TV show on CBS. Now, it's one of their episodes is going to be on Wednesday nights, but and that's a very embarrassing show to like. But my late mother and my mother and I would watch Big Brother the first season, and we bonded watching that show, and then and she loved it. In the second season, when it started, my mother was in the hospital, but she never got out of the hospital, and so she watched a little bit of the second season, and then we lost her, and but she was watching it from her hospital bed, and so ever since, I've watched that show just kind of like in honor of my mother. In the last few seasons, it's gotten real political and kind of horrible, and kind of horribly evil. Okay, that's the way I'll put it, but I still watch it, so it's coming on, and it's mental illness, I know. But, so anyway, I'll come up with some different name to call the show, because I don't want to. If I could be the Jack Parr to Graphic Man's Johnny Carson, I guess, but I don't know. I'll make it a different thing, similar but different. But Four Color Fossils and that name, those are all copywritten intellectual property of Graphic Man Enterprises. Well, last night I was looking at Eerie magazine. What is this magazine? I had no idea I had this. Ghost Warriors of World War II, One Last Look. I guess it's about crashed airplanes from World War II. I have no recollection of buying this magazine. Well, you can save 47%. Oh, there's 47 for Air Combat Magazine. Look at that, the skull. When is this from? 1994. Holy cats. That was a long time ago. Okay, Eerie. This was the companion magazine. Didn't I show this to you before? This was the companion magazine to Creepy. Eerie effectively starts with issue number 2, because issue number 1 really doesn't exist. It was a little miniature, like photocopied almost. They call it an ash can edition. They only printed, I don't know, a couple hundred copies of it. just to secure a copyright of the name Erie, because there was a company starting up called Erie Publications that put out, Tales from the Tomb and all those comics with the really gory covers, Erie Publications. And James Warren had planned to put out this magazine, Erie, so he quickly rushed that out. There's a Frazetta poster of Uncle Creepy that you could order. He rushed it out to copyright the name. So, unless you're one of these high rollers with thousands and thousands of dollars, you're not going to find an Erie #1. But at the time, Creepy had been out and was like on issue 7 or 8 when Erie started, and it was just a companion magazine done in the style of EC, with some of EC's artists. Like here this one has art by Reed Crandall, who was one of the EC artists. And what they were trying to do, James Warren demanded that they use classic monsters like Frankenstein and Dracula and wolf, vampires and werewolves, because famous monsters. Another magazine that the company was doing well, and they wanted this just to be. That's what he wanted. He really wanted it to be a classic monster magazine. Later, Creepy and Erie would kind of evolve over the course of the 1960s. This issue is from Magnifying Glass. Was here? Yes. Oh, there it is. Ow, 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 ow. 1966. Oh, the editorial offices are on at 301 East 47th Street, New York, New York. But the Captain Company, I think that was in Pennsylvania, wasn't it? I think so. Captain Company was the company, James Warren's company, where you could order all this monster memorabilia from the back. And yeah, that was box 6573, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which I think is where James Warren was from. So you can get a monster foot, monster fly, everything. There's the Big Frankie. It was actually called Gigantic Frankenstein, but it was nicknamed Big Frankie, and that's how most people know that model kit. See, they'd sell you the movie projector. There's a $30 one that's how's that different from this one? This is one that's $10. But trust me, you say $10, that's cheap. No, it wasn't cheap. Not in 1966. $10 might as well be $100 in today's money. It's criminal how things have changed. And then Blazing Combat was starting about the same time. So it was very much like they brought EC Comics back. A lot of the original artists, Frazetta, who worked for EC, this is a Frazetta cover, Reed Crandall, Wally Wood, this Joe Orlando in this case. No, Joe Orlando was an artist for EC, and then Joe Orlando at DC in the late 60s turned House of Mystery and House of Secrets and into EC style horror comics with horror hosts. The host of Erie was Cousin Erie. Saying from Warren Publishing, an all-new magazine in the creepy tradition. The scenes above only hint at the kind of horrific happenings in the first and future issues of this ghoulish gazette, hosted by me, Cousin Erie. It's like an advertisement for Erie inside of Erie, but it's actually an ad for a subscription for you to subscribe to Erie. Erie and Creepy would change in the 70s with a different editor, and they would get more artists from Europe and the Philippines, and it would stop being as much like the EC comics. And they had Steve Ditko too. But that's what I need for my painting. um, but Erie would introduce weird superheroes. There's model kits that you can get. This is a wonderful glimpse into being a kid in the 1960s when this blazing combat. This issue, come on, 1966. So, on television, you have Batman. Was on first run at this time. You had Lost in Space. Star Trek was starting about that time. You had the Beatles, the Beach Boys, and the Rolling Stones on the radio. And you had stuff like this at the newsstand. You can get books that reprint all these stories. The problem is you don't have these ads. I don't think they might reproduce some of them, but to me the ads are a big part of the fun. I think, if I start substituting for Graphic Man with the weekly show where the fossils appear, I would want to do an episode where we open all the books and look at the ads and marvel at the ads inside instead of just the covers, because that's one of the fun things is the ads. This one's in especially good condition. There are a lot of books out there of Creepy Erie. They're in really good shape because the warehouses, the one in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia, there were piles of these magazines because they have these so here's ads where you can get these magazines from Warren. Well, they had hundreds and hundreds of them, and when Warren went out of business in the early 80s, they all wound up in the collector's market. So I remember seeing at conventions piles of mint condition particular issues of Creepy and Eerie. Look at this wonderful Ditko art. The comics got gorier in the 70s, and they started to put in nudity and stuff. It wasn't horrifically. It was sort of like somewhere between PG-13 and R. This is Reed Crandall, the Mummy stocks, because it's again, that was coming from James Warren. I want to see mummies. I want to see Frankenstein. I want to see vampires. And later they would make it more psychological horror. They would have stories about. There was a really horrific story about a sniper that Neil Adams drew in one of these comics in the 70s. Man, is that damage to the book? I think it is. Every time I look at this copy, I look at that. Is that supposed to be mist coming across, or is that damage to the? I could look it up and look online and see. I think it's damage to the book. Anyway, that's Eerie 6. I know I've shown these lately. Did I? I have no idea. It's a beautiful Eerie 7. This light. Eerie 10. See, this cover here for Eerie number 12, that could just as easily be a cover of Famous Monsters, and who knows, it might have been commissioned to be a cover for Famous Monsters. But oh, my wife got me this one. If number 14, during the pandemic, when you couldn't go out to stores, she ordered some books for me. Yeah. Here's 15. $16. This is an unusual cover. I don't recognize the artist. I need to do some research on that. 16. Whoa. I've got some missing issues. Here's 21. You know, my collection's not perfect, but here's number 20. It looks like damage, but that's just slime coming down from his fingers. See, that's weird. It almost looks like a photograph, but it's a painting. But, you know, it could be a painting they just slopped a little bit of paint over. Here's the Aurora kits were based on comic strip or comic book characters that you could get at that time. Although Zorro's not really, I wouldn't consider him a comic strip or comic book character. What is Drew doing back there? Oh, Drew, you're just sitting there being a nice doggy. These records, I would say almost every one of these records you can just listen to for free on YouTube. Of course, it's not the same as owning the record. But you can record it from YouTube if you're a cheapskate. Here's some wonderful John Severin art. John Severin art. Man. Oh, it's an adaptation of The Fall of the House of Usher. What year are we up to now? March of '69. Okay. So I was about 4 years old when this came out. 20. Very possible I saw this on the newsstand. These aren't in order, actually, are they? Here's 29, and you can kind of tell at this point that Conan the Barbarian, the Marvel comic, had come out, and the Savage Tales from Marvel was competition. Marvel getting into competition with Warren in the magazines. This is oh, look at this. And this one, Buddy Saunders is one of the writers of one of the stories. Buddy Saunders was is the owner of MyComicShop.com and Lone Star Comics, and he would have been a man. I'd say he was probably in college at that time. Yeah, because I think he was probably about 12, 13 when Fantastic Four came out, and he was already a comic book dealer. 1970. Yeah. Here's editorial, an anti-Vietnam editorial. Now, James Warren, the publisher, was a Korean War veteran and lost most of his hearing in the Korean War. So he was a right-wing guy, but I guess by 1970 he saw like the folly and why are we involved in Vietnam? And it says, an editorial to the President of the United States and all the members of Congress on behalf of our readers, most of whom are from 10 to 18 years old. So he's admitting that there are 10-year-olds that read this magazine. And of course there were, and they were younger too. But if you realize that 10-year-olds are reading your comic, at this point the comics weren't they got a little worse a few years later as far as the content. We are a magazine publishing company that is in business to entertain and enlighten our audience. Enlighten. We don't publish politically oriented magazines. 3 of our titles are comics format, but we do get involved in the serious issues of our times. Both this company and our young readers have felt for some time now that our country is in deep trouble. Our first personal taste of this trouble occurred in 1965 when we came out with Blazing Combat magazine. Blazing Combat was a comic book that grimly pointed out that war is hell and inhuman, and not the glamorous, adventurous matter often depicted in the mass media. Editor Archie Goodwin wrote some of the finest anti-war stories ever seen in comics form. It was a publication we were proud of, yet Blazing Combat was a failure on the newsstands. It lasted 4 issues. We suspect that part of the reason it failed was because some of the people involved in the sales and distribution of our product didn't like the attitude we took on Vietnam. Back in 1965, it was considered by most extremely unpatriotic not to support our country's position. We received complaints about our second issue. Okay. We ignored them, but could not ignore the economic effect of losing thousands of dollars on each issue. We ceased publication. We were angry that a magazine we thought deserved to live had died, possibly because it proclaimed a message that said war is hell, and the Vietnam War is not only hell, it's absolute insanity for our country. And so Blazing Combat went quietly out of business. I'd like to see, it will never happen, imagine if Warrant, the imitation of this, that puts out Shudder and Vampirist Carmilla, imagine if they did an editorial page against our involvement in the Ukraine, and if they did that today, then they'd really be emulating Warren. Still, another involvement for us is the running of our anti-cigarette smoking ad. Created at our own expense, this half-page comics format ad, Easy Way to a Tough Surfboard, written by Archie Goodwin, drawn by Frank Frazetta, has been running in all Warren magazines for the past 5 summers. It's not the kind of ad you'll see in any other publication in America. It doesn't help sell our magazines, but we run it because we believe the message is important, more important than advertising revenue, and deserves exposure in our pages. Now we must again speak out concerning that most urgent issue, our involvement in Southeast Asia. We realize that only you, Mr. President, can end this war, the longest and costliest war in our history. Failing this, only you, the members of Congress, can stop the president from continuing a war that is taking the lives and limbs of our youth, soiling our national conscience and splitting this country down the middle. This is addressed to President Nixon. Of course, the war started under Lyndon Johnson, a Democrat, and they had to get rid of President Kennedy for Johnson to come in and amp that war up, which seemed like an insane conspiracy theory when the movie JFK came out back in the 90s, but now it seems increasingly, oh well. Most of us readers are under 21. We can't vote yet, but we don't have to be 21 to die in a war that was a mistake to begin with. That was insane, though, that the voting age was 21. But you could be drafted into a war at age 18. But you can't vote to decide whether or not that anyone voted to go to war in Vietnam. But you can vote people out, supposedly. Although, I don't know. Last few elections, people voted, but we're not supposed to talk about that on YouTube. That's why we were angry with you adults, Mr. President, members of Congress. You adults have let this drag on for half of our lives. We've tried to tell you this in our demonstrations. We tried to tell you this at Kent State. Were you listening? Perhaps you don't listen because you think we're children. You may even think it's strange or odd that words like these appear in a magazine such as this. But we're deadly serious about what we're now saying. Do something about it now, before another human's life is wasted. Give us peace now. James Warren, President, Warren Publishing Company. Yeah. So, that's the one of the famous editorials. He did another editorial during the hostage crisis, Iranian hostage crisis. But anyway, wonderful ads in the back. Oh, this is the ad he's referring to. The Frank Frazetta anti-smoking ad. Beautiful. Yeah, see, the Conan paperbacks had come out in the 60s, and then in 1970, Marvel started a Conan comic book, and then the Sword and Sorcery became very big. And I think Howler Mouse was saying last night that Warlord was the hottest seller at DC for a while. Warlord being a Sword and Sorcery comic, which was really kind of more like Edgar Rice Burroughs than Robert E. Howard, but it was the same basic principle, Sword and Sorcery. But Alex Raymond, this is where it all goes back to. All comic books, this is where everything goes to. Alex Raymond was the influence for all the original comic artists. It was the influence to the young Hugh Hefner to go into, what he went into for a living. The way that Alex Raymond drew women. Not that that's necessarily something admirable to ascribe to Alex Raymond, but he was very influential. Because, you can argue whether or not what Hugh Hefner did was a positive thing for our society. Probably it was not. Definitely not. Anyway, this is a beautiful 32. This is like, this might be, I don't know if this is the first thing Richard Corbin did for Warren, but, because it's 1971, beginning of 1971, and before that, Richard Corbin was doing underground comics. But Richard Corbin would become like the highlight of Warren books in the 70s. It seemed like he was just about their only American artist. Everyone else was from Spain or somewhere in the 70s. This is a little later in the 70s. This is another one that could just as easily be the cover of. If I just showed you this without showing you the title, you might guess it's an issue of Savage Sword of Conan, except that's a giveaway. The way the words are written, that's a very Warren looking type font. I got another copy of the same one. Again, this one could be, it's starting to be very much. I showed you these. I remember showing you these. I could have sworn I did. This is number 36. Did I? I love that. Special holiday issue. See, that's immediately identifiable as a Warren font. This is the weirdest thing, man. It's like, it really looks like what you've got is, this is supposed to be King Kong fighting the giant snake, and the 1933 King Kong, except for the fact that King Kong has no hair. And he's almost got like lizard fangs. But it looks like it might have started as a King Kong painting, and then he decided to go a different direction. I'm thinking, I don't know. I assure you that the managing editor, it says Billy Graham, that it's not the Billy Graham televangelist. But this painting on the cover is Ken Kelly, who would paint the Kiss Love Gun album cover. And dang, I just look at these ads in the back and realize, well, I've got that now, and I never got all these model kits of the torture chamber equipment. I don't know why they were reissued about 15 years ago, but they were so expensive. I guess I just thought they'd always be there, the reissues. I don't know. I can't explain my failure. I have a Vampirella one that went with that set, this model kit that looks nothing like that. Who's this artist? Jerry Grandinetti. Yeah, I remember this art is very distinctive. But it's there's a lot of sword and sorcery in here, but then Erie. I'm trying to determine when Erie changed. 33, 36. Yeah, I got to start on that painting. Yeah, I can use some of my my model kits as reference of the hot rods, and then I could position them, turn them around. And this is issue 40. So anyway, if you want to commission a painting from me, I'm going to show you the painting as I paint through. Maybe I should do a live stream of me painting it. Would that be interesting? I don't know. You tell me down below. I might be able to, since I have unlimited streaming hours until August 2nd, I could put this laptop down while I'm painting, and you could kind of watch me paint, I guess. This is issue 40. These are all the Eries that are available. Back issues. Oh, this is a great one. I have a poster of this cover. They made that into a poster. I think she's called the Ghoul Woman or something. But anyway, she's got all this army of ghouls about her. This is Erie 41 from August of 72. Oh, they had the 1972 Comic Art Convention. And they would have profiles of artists like Tom Sutton in the back. Tom Sutton was great. Little thing about the Tales from the Crypt movie that came out from Amicus Pictures, adapting the EC comics, which were really the inspiration for these comics. Oh, I thought I just saw Howard Stern. Look at that. I thought I saw, why is Howard Stern in this book? I can't, Howard Stern, what happened to him? He used to be incredibly funny. I swear he was. I have no doubt he was. What happened to him? Yeah, here's Tom Sutton art. He did a lot of art for Charlton, and he was great. He was one of the greats. Tom Sutton. And you get Tom Sutton together with Marie Severin on Not Brand X. That produced some of my favorite comic art of all time. Okay, we're into the period where I remember seeing all these books. October of 72. That's the beginning of my second grade year. I remember seeing this like it was yesterday on the book stand and in this bookstore that my mom would take me to every week right next to a Five and Dime where I would buy my model kits. Um, it was in a strip center there in Hampton, Virginia. I wish I knew what street it was on and I could look it up on Google Earth and see, what's in that store now, if that building's still. But anyway, I would see all of these, but I never got any of them. That's 43. Here's 45, another sword and sorcery kind of cover. This is February 73. And March of 73. A lot of what they're doing with Erie at this point is countering Marvel. You notice they were doing all this sword and sorcery, countering Savage Tales and Sword of Conan. And now, at this point, Marvel had gotten full-fledged into doing these black and white magazines, and they had a magazine called Vampire Tales and one called Dracula Lives that was tied in with their color comic Tomb of Dracula. Now, you can't copyright Dracula. Dracula's in public domain. It's a book that's well over 100 years old, so the copyright's expired, but you can copyright a particular look of Dracula. If you make Dracula look too much like Bela Lugosi, well, Universal Pictures will jump on you. And Marvel made Dracula a little bit different by giving him a little mustache and a distinctive look. But anyway, this is The Bloodlust of Dracula Rises Again. This is a San Julian cover. San Julian is still around and is doing covers for the new Warren style company called Warrant. This cover I very much remember seeing in Virginia, and it's just, there's Dracula and one of his vampire brides hovering over all these bodies impaled by spikes. And I remember that. Now this one, I remember telling you this story, so I know I showed you these books recently. I've just forgotten. This issue of Erie, July of 73, we were just about to move. Yeah, okay, I remember how it went. Most of my second grade year, we lived in Virginia. Somehow, we lived in Germany. My dad was in the Army, right? So we lived in Germany, and then we moved to Hampton, Virginia. But then something happened right after we moved and rented a townhouse right next to my elementary school, where my dad got orders to move to San Antonio. And so I guess my mother wanted me and my brother, because my oldest brother was already off at college, I guess she wanted us to finish the school year and not move in the middle. So we stayed until the summer of 73, but my dad was already in San Antonio, and my dad had a house built. So he designed a lot of the look of the house and plotted out the landscaping of the yard and everything. So the house was finished, and we moved from Hampton, Virginia to San Antonio. Anyway, most of my second grade year, my father wasn't around. It was just me and my brother Mike and myself. So it was like I just had a mom. And when I'd go to that bookstore, I would show these books to my mom. I don't think I showed her the one with the spikes to the people. And I'd say, could I buy this? And she'd always flip to the book and say no. Usually. She let me buy one Vampirella and a Monsters Unleashed, a couple of things. But I guess my father came back towards the end of the school year. I don't know, he was there. I remember he was there in that bookstore, and I went up to my dad and said, can I buy this? And he just said, sure. And he didn't even question it. And it's like, but anyway, it's like a man thing, swamp thing kind of creature. And of course, those characters weren't original either, because the Heap in the 1950s or late 40s, whatever, really was the first swamp creature. But this was Warren's swamp creature. And this was when it started, actually. They started to have, like, there's this Western hero they have here, Coffin. No one knows where he came from. One day he just rode into Arizona, righting the wrong doings there. Men called him Coffin. Man without a past, man without a future, a man dead. Fastest death in the West. So it's this dead-looking guy. I guess he might be a zombie. He's got a Billy Jack hat, and he's missing an eye. He's kind of like Warren's Jonah Hex. And then they have the Curse of the Werewolf, and the Werewolf was a continuing series, and Coffin was a continuing series. Vampirella had a continuing series in Vampirella, and then the other stories in the book were just single episodes, you know. But and Creepy always just had single episodes. So at this point is when Eerie started to have continuing serials. So here it says it says the Eerie exploits of Dracula, the Mummy, the Werewolf, and Dax the Warrior. So you had a continuing Mummy storyline, a continuing Werewolf storyline, and Dax the Warrior, basically a Conan type character. And it's another copy of the same one. So and then they introduced Hunter, the demon killer from the future. Not Hunter Biden. But so they're basically starting up continuing stories where you would have to buy every issue of Eerie to follow the storylines, very much like Marvel did, where, you know, you had... And see, the Mummy, Hunter, Shrek, and introducing Dr. Arceus. And they actually have a color section with the Spirit in here. At this point, the Spirit was Warren started to Warren started printing the Spirit, a separate magazine. But here's what they would do. They would take the old Spirit supplements. Spirit started as a little free comic book that would come in the Sunday newspaper. It would be a little supplement, and they called it the Spirit section, and it was in color. But what they did is Will Eisner had his original artwork, and when they printed the Spirit stories in black and white in the magazine, Richard Corbin, this wonderful artist, would create the shading and make it look wonderful. I don't think Will Eisner liked it, but I thought it was wonderful. And here is a Spirit story, but it's colored by Richard Corbin. And so it's a weird fusion. It very much has that Richard Corbin feel, and Will Eisner as well. But the Spirit had a sidekick named Ebony, and I think, and then this is kind of an advertisement for the first issue of the Spirit. I don't think that the Will Eisner Spirit stories can be reprinted anymore in today's climate, because of Ebony was a very heroic character and everything, and very smart, but he was drawn in a stereotypical way and given a very stereotypical dialect. He was a very likable character, but I think that any publisher would be committing suicide if they reprinted Will Eisner's stuff now, unfortunately. And here's issue 58. And they're on the back, they're advertising Creepy there with some Richard Corbin art. Eerie, and that's the character Hunter, not again, not Hunter Biden. The Spirit and Vampirella. They had 4 magazines, and then I think they were putting out another one called Comics International. Here's issue 59, and this is, I think, 10 stories of this guy Dax the Damned, and they're all it's just like it's like a Savage Sword of Conan magazine, but it's all this wonderful art by Esteban Maroto. I used to pronounce it Esteban Maroto. I think it's basically the Spanish name for Stephen is Esteban. At least that's what I was taught in high school Spanish. I need to ask my wife because that Spanish is her first language. I don't like mispronouncing names, and I've realized on YouTube that I've mispronounced a lot of comic names over the years. So. And see, by this point, we're up to 1974. There's a lot of nudity in this. It's very European, where they probably aren't as bothered by that. But it's for James Warren in that editorial very clearly said our readers start at age 10, and this has got nudity on pretty much every page. So. But I understand, I guess, why my mother was a little leery about me getting these books. But anyway, I've got another copy of the same one. I got 2 copies of that. It's the Super Special Summer Giant. Here's that guy, the Terror of Arizona, Coffin. But yeah, the hat is just like Billy Jack. I've never seen Billy Jack, but I gotta get started on that painting. That's gonna be fun. Same. I think I have 2 copies of that. Yeah, here they have. It's kind of another copy. 3 copies. Here's another one of their continuing characters. They're all like horror superheroes, basically. And then this other character, El Cid, or El Cid, or however you pronounce it. I always pronounce it El Cid. There's another character. Some of these may have been stories that they just imported directly from Europe. Some of them might have been commissioned. See, El Cid, it's, again, very much sword and sorcery. And then they got Merlin and Hunter too. Yeah, it's beautiful artwork. I mean, but you see it looks very European now, as opposed to those early issues of Eerie that used a lot of the EC artists. Now it's all European artists, and it's just a different. That's just how you tell the different time periods. We're up to issue 66. Here's issue 67. We're up to August 1975. This guy, Coffin, looks a lot like the Amazing Colossal Man, right? It had that kind of missing eye bit. Holy smoke. Yeah, they're starting to get a little twisted at this point. Here's some Alex Toth art. I always pronounce it Toth, and then I hear people pronounce it Toth. I don't know. How are you supposed to it's just like, yeah, there's some it's starting to get a little twisted here, and I can't even show you the picture I'm talking about. It's on the back cover. Issue 67. Look on the back cover. You'll see what I'm talking about. It's a little So if you just picked up a random issue of Eerie, you're going to be in the middle of a storyline. You know, it's like a superhero comic you pick up randomly, and I'm sure you could figure out what's going on. That's cool stuff. I had that model kit. I wonder what happened to it. I had all of those actually. No, the Enterprise. Where was the Star Trek ad? Oh, come on. Come on, man. Oh, well. Look, you could get Mask of Uncle Creepy and Cousin Eerie. Oh, here it is. Man, the Enterprise model was only $2.50. I had that hanging from my ceiling. I had the Mr. Spock. I've got a new Mr. Spock. I haven't built it. The Klingon battle cruiser, I had that. I still have most of the pieces of it. I have this. Still have the box and parts of this kit. But I had every one of these. It was like a big deal. These model kits were from the 70s. These didn't come out when the TV show was on the air. Maybe the Enterprise did, but all these other model kits came out during the early 70s when the TV show was put into syndication, and it was like a big deal. It's like the model kit, the model hobby shop would have big signs that the Klingon battle cruisers coming out like March 22nd. It was all exciting to all the kids that this new model kit was coming out. And then when the shuttlecraft came out, the Galileo 7, it was a big deal. I remember that. And then, of course, the Young Frankenstein movie. I've got a giant poster of this. I think I done this show before. I think everything I'm saying I said before. Here's a beautiful Bernie Wrightson Frankenstein story. It's just called the Muck Monster, but it's obviously a prototype for his adaptation of Frankenstein. Here's 80. There's another 80. Here's 81. Frazetta painting. It's reversing. If you look closely, she's holding a little miniature King Kong. This is the one that introduces the Rook, who was one of my favorite characters. They made that was a hit when they introduced the Rook. He was a time traveler. Here's an all Richard Corbin issue. This is a wonderful issue. I would get this issue if you can. It's number 86. Get it from Lone Star Comics. I did. I bought this at Lone Star Comics, and I'll look up when this came out. September of 77. Okay. All right. Well, yeah. Okay, it's a few months after Star Wars came out, and I bought it in the original location, and Lone Star Comics opened in June of 1977, and I bought that in September of 77. So that's one of my first purchases at that store. And then I showed you all of these. Man, this is the lamest episode ever. You guys must be ticked at me, because it's like I showed all this because I used that image of the girl that. I used that as the thumbnail of the episode. This is such a great painting. Man, this stinks. I showed you all these books. swear I did, but then I don't remember showing you this one. Maybe I just showed you a few issues and not all of them. That's the Democrat National Convention. This issue of Erie has the Rook and the Vampirella and a Vampirella crossover. That was, telling you, the Rook was great. Here is their version of Gold Key's Magnus Robot Fighter. It's MacTavish Robot Smasher. And this is a collection of Richard Corbin's time travel story. And this is, I never was that crazy about that art on that cover. Oh, here's a copy that's not bagged. I have 2 copies of that one. But this is after the, after Star Wars came out. It's all the Warren magazines got all Star Wars down. Well, there's a little bit of Superman because that was a new movie. But well, there's still some monster stuff, but it would start disappearing to the point where it was all the space stuff in the back. And it's not, I love that stuff, and it's not that I you take the 1966 Marvel superheroes cartoons that were magnificent, but it was mainly the sound and the music and the voices, and they traced the original art from the Silver Age. That was wonderful, and the color was great. But if you strip them down into these 8mm Super 8 films that you order, imagine watching it silent and black and white. Well, you could also get color versions, but without the sound, and the pictures barely moved. I mean, they were. That would not be the best way to watch those cartoons. 98. Okay. Yeah, see, the Erie had a big hit with the Rook. He had a robot, and his great-great-great-grandfather he rescued from the Battle of the Alamo right before he was supposed to be killed, so it didn't change, time. And see, the Rook was all started in Erie. He was all over Erie. I recommend these issues, and then Rook got his own comic. This is where they're completely trying to go after the Star Wars audience. 101. We're getting up into 1979 and getting into the later period. This cover looks a little too, I don't know, kind of a little too heavy metal-ish.